This is The Guide Gals, a modern wedding-focused podcast by the experts at Here Comes the Guide. I'm Chelsea, a designer and inspired creative who's probably racked up over 12,000 hours on Pinterest and the friend who's going to shoot it to you straight.
And I'm Caroline, a social media manager who's obsessed with dogs as ring bearers and will inevitably cry over your wedding video. We've seen it from all sides. We've been brides, planners, bridesmaids, and have worked at standout brands throughout the industry.
Think of us as an extension of your wedding party and hang out with us as we share the ins, outs, ups, and downs of the road to I Do.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Guide Gals podcast. Today we're going to be talking about all of the things you need to think about when you're deciding between an indoor or an outdoor wedding.
Yes. So when you're choosing between an indoor or an outdoor celebration, it's really going to come down to one word. And that word is control. So the fact is you have more control over your environment with an indoor event space. It's going to be climate controlled, weatherproof, and you're able to splurge on decor without wondering if the wind will knock all of the stuff over or you'll just have like some crazy weather event. You can display your buttercream cake without worrying if it will melt from the heat.
Yeah.
You know, lots of things are, under way more control if you're inside. So you can have restrooms that you can count on, kitchen facilities, electrical outlets are going to be there. They're already built in. And you won't have to sweat bugs away or deal with your hair sticking to your lip gloss because it's really windy. Yeah. So if you're more, maybe a slightly type A personality, or if you would label yourself as a control freak, maybe an indoor reception space will provide a little bit more peace of mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. But that being said, there are so much to love about outdoor weddings. Obviously, there is just something about being out in the nature and the backdrop that it provides, especially if you're in an area where you're going to get married with redwood groves behind you or right on the beach or like lush gardens and things that I'm thinking of. There is nothing to me that beats that. The great outdoors provides such a beautiful area for you to get married in, to celebrate this big day. But there are those inherent risks, especially with having a reception outdoors. But again, if you and your fiance are somebody who are more adventurous, outdoorsy types, there's just nothing better than having an alfresco wedding, in our opinion. So if you're okay with swallowing the fact that there might be some unexpected things, in the previous episode, we talked about how during a ceremony, there was a bear eating a moose.
Oh, yeah.
If you're okay with potentially running into that, then I really do think that outdoor weddings are going to be exactly what you want.
Yeah, there are lots of things to think about here. It's going to come down to, once again, control, your style, and what you're up for or ready to deal with. But we're going to dive into all of that today in this episode and help you to figure out if an indoor or an outdoor wedding is going to be best for you.
And before we jump into any of that, though, we obviously are going to be talking about what we're drinking today.
Caroline, what are you drinking today?
Guys, it's not that interesting. Recently, I started a 21-day challenge with my best friend, Anna. She is an influencer, so you should follow her. Her name is A. Laricchia, or Anna Laricchia. But she recently went on this huge health journey and lost over 80 pounds and did it all naturally. Blah, blah, blah. I think she's incredible and very inspirational. But she is on a 21-day challenge, and as part of that, I decided I would join her. And we're drinking 120 ounces of water a day. In fact, I think she might be drinking more than that at this point because she ups her goals all the time. She went from walking 12,000 steps a day to 15,000 steps the other day. I don't know why. For me, 120 is where I'm sticking, and I'm peeing all the time. You don't need to know that. Yeah. I am peeing constantly, but I'm going back and forth between water, which is what I have right now because I need to get another, I need to drink this whole thing in the next hour. Oops. I have goals. I have to drink a Stanley by 12, a Stanley by 4, and a Stanley by the end of the night. But I'm peeing at all hours. It's really bad. So yeah, just water for me right now. And I'll probably have an element later to help me get through all of that water.
Yeah, that's a lot of water. I'm not doing the challenge, even though Caroline did share the details with me. And I said, I don't know. But I am also drinking water in a Stanley. And yeah, I'm not going to drink probably 120 ounces. I was going to say gallons. Wow. Ounces. I'm not going to do that. I should do that, but I probably won't.
It's really tough. The thing I hate the most is that if I drink it too close to bedtime, I will be waking up at 3 a.m. and peeing, which is what happened last night. So tough for Caroline, but I love it. Water girls today, we are the picture of hydration and health.
Something like that. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to dive into is just going to be indoor reception considerations. As I mentioned before, you're going to have more control over the unpredictable elements. So, an indoor space obviously provides you with climate controlled bliss and no concerns about wind, sun, rain, or like any other freak weather accidents or incidents that might happen. So, if you want to avoid having to come up with any type of plan B, then an indoor reception is probably going to be the way to go for you. And then, of course, there are going to be fewer logistics to worry about. So, unless you're getting married in a completely like raw space, whatever that may be, you can probably rest easy knowing that you've got built-in power outlets, like I mentioned. You'll have restrooms that you don't have to truck in. You don't have to worry about like porta potties or anything like that. Restrooms will be right there and available for everybody with running water. And you'll have kitchen facilities most likely as well. So most indoor venues have nearby parking as well, which is really great. They usually will have wheelchair accessibility too. So that's something to think about depending on who's on your guest list too. Mm-hmm. Okay, another thing to consider though, the first two things were more so positive. This one, maybe not as positive. You're going to have limited views, of course, and limited space. So, unless your indoor venue has really like gorgeous floor to ceiling windows that overlook like an amazing landscape, you're probably going to have a very limited view or no view at all of the outdoors. So maybe that doesn't matter to you, but maybe it does. It's something to think about, just much different than what that outdoor space will provide in terms of views. And then once again, of course, there's limited space. So if you're in any type of building or indoor space, it's just not limitless, right? So, if you have a really large guest list, you're going to have to think about that and make sure that if you are celebrating an indoor space that it can accommodate all of your guests comfortably. It's just an added thing to think about. Yeah. Another thing to think about is going to be possible decor restrictions. So you might be tempted to, pick an indoor space and say, you know what, there's no views. That's fine. I have total control. I'm going to decorate, I'm going to go crazy with decorations. But a lot of venues, all venues, I will say, have rules of some sort. So, for example, if you are wanting to get married in a barn and have a barn reception, celebrate in there, you might not be allowed to hang anything from the rafters. So, you might have envisioned hanging a bunch of string lights all over the place. Well, they might say actually, no, you may not do that. That is against the rules. And then a lot of people too love the look of, flickering votives. A lot of places don't allow candles. There's some ways around that. The fake candles look pretty real. They look pretty close, but it's just another thing to think about. Stuff isn't always allowed. So you have to talk to your venue manager about the vision that you have for your wedding. Read that contract carefully and be sure that if you're opting for an indoor space with the thought of going crazy with the decor and making that, the big thing, that's what you're going to do. You have to make sure that you can actually do the things that you're envisioning. Okay, now this one is more of a positive one. Once again, the word control is really coming into play. So your catering and your cake, if you're having an indoor reception celebration, are most likely going to look really good and be tasting really good. You're not going to have to worry about it. So it's climate controlled, and there's most likely not going to be any wind or anything happening or any weather happening indoors. So if you have your cake kind of set out for display during your reception, you can be sure that it's going to be just fine. It's not going to, fly off the table from a big gust of wind, and, it's not going to start melting if it's a summertime wedding and really hot outside. Another thing to consider, a lot of people will have grazing tables, all sorts of stuff like that. I'm imagining a big charcuterie table, which is just the best ever. They look beautiful. Guests love them, and it's really great to be able to have that available for people to kind of pick at. But if it is really hot outside, then that meat and cheese is gonna be getting really sweaty, and it's so gross. It just won't last the whole night, and it aside from it not being as appetizing as it once was, it might not even be like totally safe for people to eat. Like people could potentially even get sick from eating it. So that's just like something, to consider if, but if it's inside, of course that stuff is going to be temperature controlled. It's going to be just fine. You're going to have a kitchen close by and, very easy for stuff to be tended to inside. So that's a big positive, is that your food will remain okay, and like probably no bugs either. That's another thing too. So that's really positive. Okay, the last thing that you're going to want to consider is going to be the lighting situation. So if you're indoors, you're most likely going to be relying heavily on artificial lighting. So whether that's for the entire reception celebration time or just part of it, like once again, you might have a reception space that's indoors but allows plenty of like really great natural light with big windows and stuff. Other times that really might not be the case. So that means that you're going to want to make sure that your photographer is skilled at capturing beautiful photos indoors under these conditions. So, if you're not a photographer or you don't know about that stuff, which, I certainly don't claim to be, but it makes a big difference. And it can be a lot trickier for them to capture really high quality photos, media with artificial lighting or places that have like a real lack of lighting. So something to think about for sure, and something to maybe even just ask your like venue coordinator about. They'll know about it, like what your lighting options are. So
I will say one thing on lighting that I think is a benefit to indoors is, especially in the summer when it doesn't get dark until like really late. If you were starting your dance party at like 7 and you're outside, it's still light out and it can feel kind of weird. But if you're inside, you can control the lighting, and then it's darker, and then the party feels a little bit more like, I don't know, fun. I've noticed that a couple of times. The difference between like actually being able to use lighting inside helps the party atmosphere.
Set the tone.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Now we're going to talk about some things to consider when it comes to outdoor weddings. And there are a lot of things to consider, but I think if you're listening to this episode, you'll be able to make a really good decision on whether you want indoor or outdoor. Because the first thing with outdoor obviously is Mother Nature is gorgeous, beautiful, stunning, And it's great. Like, you're going to have such an incredible mood for your wedding, having just like being outdoors in whatever space you choose, whether that is the beach, in the woods, by the lake, in the gardens, like whatever it is. But with that decision, you do expose yourself to the elements, I would say. Rain, heavy wind that might mess up your hair or makeup, or animals or bugs. A whole host of things could happen. Even like it just being too sunny can actually be an issue too sometimes, whether that's for photography or just the fact that your guests are going to need more water so they don't pass out. So thinking about all of the things that you might be exposed to and planning ahead for them can still give you that control that you might want, but still give you the outdoor option. So just think about all of those things. So on that note, you really do want to bring a bad weather backup plan for every instance of bad weather that you can think of. So if you are thinking about having it outside and you want to think about, okay, if it rains, here's our backup plan for the ceremony space, the reception space, for my outfit, for our guests. Like, there are things that you will want to plan and bring. And we've talked about this in another episode. So if you want to go listen to that, we talk a little bit more about like rainy wedding days or just like inclement weather type of things. I can't say weather today. Rainy weather, inclement weather. Geez, I'll get to it. But obviously this is a really big day, so you want to be prepared. So keep in mind that plan B isn't always free. You will have to maybe reserve some funds in your mind for these potential outcomes, and maybe you don't need that plan B. Great. With whatever money you've set aside for it, now you get to use on your honeymoon. But I would make sure you, one, think about that, plan out plan B, and also make sure you've funded plan B in some way, because contingency plans, those canopies that you might need to rent last minute, they can be pricey. Another thing to consider is any permits or restrictions that you need. This is not a really fun topic of it. It is a good thing to think about. So sometimes there isn't necessary permits or any restrictions on like public spaces, but then you might also have people in the background of your photos. And I experienced this recently, twofold, being It was a public area, it was a public park, but they have a beautiful mansion on that public park. So people are riding their bikes and walking around, and they try and like keep guests away from your outdoor space. But there were people taking senior photos like not too far from us, and we had to have someone go and be like, go take them somewhere else. Like there's a wedding. Come on.
My gosh.
Yeah, that's weird. But this same venue has run into a lot of restrictions surrounding the time frame for music. So the neighbors of that place are actually a little bit crazy, I would say. And if they're listening to this, you're crazy, but they're never going to. They are really strict about what time the music ends. And they have called the police on this venue like lots of times unnecessarily. And now a police car is just stationed there all the time when there is weddings. It's insane.
That's
But
wild.
I mean, things to think about. Like, you will not be able to extend your dance party at this venue because they are so strict on the like music allowances. So if you want to have that, like if you're having music outdoors, obviously you have a curfew kind of time frame that you can't play loud music anymore. So thinking about those things is really important. So thinking about noise ordinances, those restrictions on amplified sounds, or even like the size limit of tents or canopies or other rentals that you might have, there may be restrictions on that. So yes, outdoors super fun in that respect, like having your party outdoors, but music has to be turned off by a certain time, and you need to have the right space for your guests, but you also need to have the right space for whatever permits or restrictions allow for. Now, another positive of an outdoor wedding is that you can really keep decor pretty simple. Like the outdoors is going to speak for itself. Mm-hmm. If you have the beach as your backdrop, you do not need to go over and above with all of your other decor items, which is great because you can save a lot of money in this. If you do want to do any extra enhancements, just think about what the wind could knock down, what rain could ruin, other things like that. Like a gust of wind knocking over your ceremony arch would be really, really tough. So make sure you're thinking about all the other, again, natural elements that you might be in face of when you're thinking about the decor, or keep it simple because the outdoors is going to, again, speak for itself. It's beautiful and stunning as is. Now, one thing that we do think about between indoor and outdoors, indoor venues may not need a lot of rentals. They may already have those spaces stocked with tables, chairs, linens. The outdoors does not. So depending on where you are, if you are working with a venue, they may have those rentals available. And if you are working in a space that is more publicly accessible, or maybe it's your grandparents' farm and you are out in a field, you will need to rent a ton of things. You will need to rent a tent, you will need to rent tables, chairs, restrooms potentially. There are a lot of things that you need to think about with that. And again, that adds up, and you will have to budget for it for sure, but you do want to make sure you spend money on those expenses because that's what's going to make your guests comfortable and make you have fun. Now, to play the devil's advocate to what I said before with lighting, inside and outside, obviously indoors you have a lot more control over it. There is just something about the outdoor lighting. If you were outdoors and the sun is setting at your reception, that is magical. It is so beautiful. It's amazing. And it just adds this extra ambiance, but you won't have as much control over it. So lighting for your photographer at night could get a little bit difficult. Or, like I said before, the party may not feel like it's getting started until much later once the sun sets. And honestly, also, when the sun does set, sometimes it gets really cold after that point. So there could be a huge drop in temperature, and those are just more things to think about. A small thing that I think is really fun is the additions that you can add to the cocktail hour reception kind of thing with outdoors. So I've seen so many outdoor weddings where right next to the cocktail hour is a bunch of lawn games. In one of the most recent weddings I attended, there was like special lawn games from Finland, which is where her family is from. And I've seen things like cornhole or bags, whatever you want to call it. Lots of different things like that. And I think that can add such a fun, lighthearted feel to an outdoor wedding. It gives guests something to do. It's just a fun little element that you can add. Things like giant Jenga, you could even do beer pong. There's lots of fun ones. And you can always make them kid friendly and stuff too. So that's a great thing to add to an outdoor event, which you may not be able to accommodate indoors. Because one of my friends who loves to play cornhole has notoriously gotten cornhole bags stuck on the ceiling somehow during indoor like cornhole tournaments. So just something to keep in mind. You may not be able to accommodate that indoors. And finally, and kind of a big thing for outdoors, is the creatures and critters that will also attend your wedding. The mosquitoes recently have been absolutely awful. So thinking about that, thinking about other animals that might run up and want to check things out. Again, our famous example of the bear and the moose going, yeah, fighting,
So
and then
wild.
yeah, just like truly, yeah, truly wild things can happen.
Wildlife.
Wildlife. I think in another wedding, one of our coworkers was telling about us about was a snake came up and one of the groomsmen killed the
Oh, yeah.
snake during the ceremony. Like things will happen if you allow it. If you are outdoors, there things will happen, and there will be bugs that attend your wedding and might, take their place on the food table and flies or whatever else it may be. So really think through that, because you can just use well-placed citronella candles or have bug spray available, and just making sure that that's taken care of. I think that will make everybody feel better except for the bugs. You want to get rid of them. I think those are most of those outdoor things that I wanted to chat about. So sorry that was a long list, but we want to make sure you feel well prepared in your decision.
Yeah, and I mean, as you heard, there were just positives and negatives that go with both of these. So, really, like, whatever look that you want to go for, whatever, like feeling that you want your wedding to have, if you have a certain theme involved, I think that if it matches better with indoor or outdoor, that's what you can lean towards. There's always going to be a positive or a negative
Yeah.
involved in both of those options. So, of course, you can also kind of have the best of both worlds. You can always opt for an outdoor ceremony with an indoor reception to follow. So, you don't have to be like completely one or the other. And if the weather permits, you can enjoy both of those different settings. So,
Yeah.
once again, it really comes down to what venue you choose. What you care about, what you want your photos to look like. It's essentially going to be the entire backdrop to all of it. But yes, many venues have options for you to have a combination, whether it be ceremony, reception, whatever that combination may be. There's lots of options out there to be able to have the best of both worlds, like I said.
One of my favorite places, Pittsburgh Botanic Gardens. They have this outdoor space for the ceremony, and then there's a clear tent. It's very large, and then there's an indoor barn area. So it kind of like just like there's like a gradient of like fully outdoors, like then the tent kind of feels outdoors but has an indoor safety to it, and the barn is fully indoors obviously, but all of them flow together seamlessly to make sure that your event feels seamless. It like flows really naturally, and then even within the clear tent they have string lights put up so that it continues to give that feeling of like you're under the stars as it gets later at night. They have a little fireplace area that you can sit around right next to like the tent option. So there's a lot of really sweet things that I think they do really well, and they are not the only venue that does that. So finding a space that is really going to be the perfect mixture, either mixture or like if you want to be fully indoors, fully outdoors, lots of venues like that. And there's lots of venues that are also that perfect in between if you're feeling like, I like some of these points and other of these points make me worried. So finding the right venue for you is obviously super important. And a great place to do that is at herecomesaguide.com, which is the place that we're very biased about, but there are a lot of ways that you can look for indoor ceremonies or outdoor receptions. Like you can search all of these criteria for your area or the area that you want to get married in and find the venue that's perfect for you.
Yes, we love herecomesaguide.com. There are, lots of little buttons that you can choose to help narrow your search based on all kinds of things. And some of those things include indoor or outdoor. So, super easy to navigate. If you do plan your wedding, and of course, when you do, you're going to be choosing indoor or outdoor, let us know what you choose and let us know if this episode helped affect your decision at all. I know it can be confusing if you don't work in weddings. Like, oh my gosh, like what even goes into each of those scenarios. So hopefully this was helpful to you. But as always, if you have any questions for us, any episode suggestions, anything like that, you can always reach out to us on our website, which is theguidegirlspodcast.com. On our website, you can also find lots of totally free resources that you can download, lots of freebies, as well as our full episode library. So lots of other good stuff on there. You can also find us on Instagram at The Guide Gals Podcast. We're on TikTok at The Guide Gals Pod, and you can find the video version of all of our episodes on the Here Comes the Guide YouTube channel. So if you want to hear more from us or see more from us in any way, that's where you can find us.
Yes. And we would love for you to find us there because we are truly here to help you in your wedding planning process. So it would be a joy to hear from you. And Yeah. Also, if you have any more things that you want to know about for wedding planning, seriously, get in our DMs, get in our email, because we love to do episodes every once in a while that are all about your questions.
Yes, we definitely do.
Yeah. And until one of those episodes, I think that's everything for today. So, cheers.
Yeah, cheers.